Welcome to the deep dive. It's June 13th, 2025, and yeah, we're ready to jump into your source material.
That's right, pulling out those key insights, the knowledge you need.
Exactly. This is part one of our look at the information flow for today, specifically curated for you.
And our mission, as always, is to kind of cut through the noise, deliver the important stuff.
Helps you stay informed, especially with all these crucial topics floating around. We've got a real mix today.
Government schemes, economic updates.
Global reports, environmental notes, even a bit of astronomy later on.
And some of these topics might sound familiar, which is good. It's a chance to revisit, maybe reinforce some concepts.
Build those layers of understanding. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with a pretty major welfare scheme focused on energy access.
Right. That would be the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, or PMUY. The sources definitely flag this as a key scheme.
Providing domestic LPG connections.
Yeah, basically helping households, especially rural and deprived ones, move away from traditional fuels, firewood, coal.
Which have health implications, right? Indoor pollution and all that. It was launched, 2016?
2016, correct. And initially, the goal was 8 crore connections by 2020.
Okay.
Then came Ujjwala 2.0. That added another target, 1.6 crore more connections.
And they included something for migrant households, too.
Yes, a special facility, recognizing they might not have permanent addresses, made it more accessible.
Makes sense. And eligibility is quite specific, isn't it?
It is. It's for adult women, 18 plus, from listed deprived categories SC, ST, certain forest dwellers, island communities, etc.
And the results, how's it looking?
Pretty significant, according to the sources. Over 10.33 crore connections delivered by March 2025. So they surpassed the initial targets.
Wow.
And what's also interesting is the infrastructure growth. LPG distributors, that number jumped massively.
How much?
Like 83% growth between 2014 and 2024. It shows the reach expanding.
So the scheme's completed 9 years now. That infrastructure growth is key to actually delivering those connections, I suppose?
Exactly. And thinking about why this matters for you, the listener, it's more than just gas cylinders.
Right. It connects to health, like we said. Less smoke indoors.
Definitely. Also frees up time, particularly for women, not having to collect firewood.
And environmental benefits, too. Less reliance on biomass. It's got multiple angles.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting gears a bit. From household energy to the economy and agriculture. Edible oils.
Ah, yes. That's been in the news. Prices and domestic supply concerns.
Exactly. The context is policy adjustments, trying to manage prices, and also, boost domestic refining.
So edible oils, basically vegetable oils we consume. India grows quite a few, right? Groundnut, mustard, soybean.
Sunflower, sesame, several major ones. But here's the thing.
What's that?
Despite having a decent chunk of global oilseed area, our domestic production, well, it doesn't meet the demand. Not even close.
So lots of imports.
Huge amounts. The sources highlight India as the largest importer of vegetable oils globally.
The largest, wow. More than China.
Followed by China and the U.S., And what we import is mostly palm oil.
Okay.
It makes up like 57% of imports. Then soybean oil, about 29%, and sunflower around 14%.
And domestically, what are our main oilseed crops?
Soybean, rapeseed, and mustard, and groundnut. They account for like over 90% of our domestic oilseed production.
So policy-wise, what's being done?
Well, one immediate step mentioned is reducing the basic custom duty on major imported crude edible oils from 20% down to 10%.
To ease prices, presumably?
Right. But there are also longer-term strategies, like the National Mission on Edible Oils, Oil Palm, that NMEOP from 2021.
Focus specifically on oil palm, aiming for self-reliance there.
Exactly. And there's also the National Food Security Mission, NFSM, which targets increasing production for all 9 major oilseeds and expanding the area for oil palm and tree-borne oilseeds.
So it's a mix, isn't it? Managing imports and prices now while pushing for more domestic production down the line.
Precisely. It's that balancing act between trade policy and agricultural strategy.
Yeah.
Quite complex.
Okay, moving on. Social progress. There's some interesting data from the ILO on Social Security.
Yeah, this is quite striking. The sources point to a big jump in coverage in India.
How big?
From just 19% back in 2015 to 64.3% by 2025.
64%. That covers, what, over 94 crore people?
That's the figure cited. A massive 45 percentage point increase over 10 years.
That's incredible progress. How does that compare globally?
Sources say India ranks second globally in terms of how much that coverage surged.
Wow. And just to clarify, Social Security here means...
Basically, the protection society provides.
Right.
Access to health care, income security for things like old age, unemployment, sickness, disability.
The safety net.
Exactly. Built on, sort of, 3 pillars: social assistance, social insurance, and labor market programs.
And this surge is linked to specific government initiatives, right?
Yes, the sources list examples like PMSYM for old age contributions, PMJJBY for life cover, Adult Pension Yojana, PMSBY for accident cover, PDS for food security, Ayushman Bharat for health, PMAYG for housing. Quite a few contributing factors.
Right. And for you, the listener, understanding this surge is important because it shows a significant expansion of that safety net. It affects vulnerability, welfare for a huge population.
Definitely a key development indicator.
Okay, let's turn to the seas now. Maritime safety and environmental issues. There was an incident involving the Indian Coast Guard.
Yes, intense operations recently on a burning cargo ship off the Kerala coast. Rescue, towing it within India's EEZ.
And there was a previous sinking nearby that raised concern.
Right, involving hazardous cargo. It really highlights the risks of maritime shipping.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
Well, the sources lay out several. There's the sea itself, storms, tsunamis, underwater wrecks.
Okay.
Then increased risk in busy channels due to those wrecks. The state of the ships themselves, they're getting bigger, older sometimes, denser traffic.
And the cargo?
That's a big one. More hazardous chemicals, dangerous goods, even nuclear waste being transported. Plus, human error, piracy, terrorism, conflicts.
A lot of potential problems, and the consequences can be severe.
Absolutely. Environmentally, you've got marine pollution, oil spills, damage to biodiversity, issues with ballast water.
Health risks, too, from toxic exposure.
And huge economic losses. Devalued coastlines, massive cleanup costs, impacts on fishing, tourism.
Are there international rules to deal with this?
Yes, several conventions mentioned. The Bunker Convention deals with ship owner liability for oil pollution damage. The Wreck Removal Convention allows states to remove wrecks. The HNS Convention covers hazardous and noxious substances, and MARPOL focuses on preventing pollution, especially oil.
Okay, multiple frameworks. Where does India stand?
Here's a key point from the source material. India is currently a signatory only to MARPOL among those specific conventions listed.
Only MARPOL. Interesting.
It does raise questions, doesn't it, about how global trade and environmental responsibility intersect, particularly regarding things like wrecks and hazardous cargo beyond just oil. How international frameworks are adopted.
Yeah. Food for thought. Okay, let's move ashore. Higher education governance, the UGC.
Right, the University Grants Commission. They apparently sent out a notice to universities and colleges.
You read what?
Non-compliance with the anti-ragging regulations from way back in 2009. They're giving institutions 30 days to get compliant.
Ragging, still a persistent issue.
Yeah.
How do the regulations define it?
Basically, any disorderly conduct, verbal or physical, that's rude or causes hardship or psychological harm to freshers or junior students.
In the 2009 regulations, they're quite comprehensive.
Seems so. They specify actions needed before admission, like warnings in prospectuses, getting undertakings signed by students and parents.
Okay.
And on admission, providing info leaflets, running sensitization programs involving seniors.
And structures within the institutions.
Crucially, yes. Mandating anti-ragging committees, anti-ragging squads, and a monitoring cell in each institution. Plus, clear punishments are laid out. Suspension, expulsion, fines, a range of penalties.
Are there other measures beyond the UGC regs?
Yeah, the sources also mention a central monitoring committee under the Ministry of Education, a national anti-ragging helpline for support and contains.
And wasn't there a committee recommendation and a Supreme Court ruling?
Exactly. The Raghavan Committee recommended making it a criminal offense and collective responsibility. And a Supreme Court judgment in 2009 pushed for the helpline and independent monitoring.
So multiple layers of effort. For you listening, this highlights the ongoing challenge and the regulatory push to make campuses safer for incoming students.
It's clearly still a focus area.
All right, let's look globally again. Fisheries. There's a new FAO report out?
Yes, the review of the State of World Marine Fishery Resources 2025. And a big theme is IUU fishing.
IU. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Can you break that down?
Sure. Illegal is fishing without permission or breaking national laws. Unreported is when catches aren't reported or are misreported, violating regulations. And unregulated usually refers to fishing by vessels without nationality or in areas managed by regional bodies where the vessel's flag state isn't a party or in ways that undermine conservation rules. It's a catch-all for fishing outside the rules.
Got it. And the report mentions deep-sea species being particularly vulnerable.
Very much so. They tend to mature late, grow slowly, live long lives, don't reproduce often. all factors making them really susceptible to overfishing.
And the main threats are?
Overfishing generally, and IU fishing specifically.
What are the key findings from this FAO report? Are things looking bad?
Some worrying numbers. For those deep-sea stocks, only 29% are considered sustainably fished.
Only 29%? Wow. What about fisheries overall?
Globally, about 64.5% of all fish stocks are within sustainable levels. But that means a significant 35.5% are being fished unsustainably or overfished.
That's over a third. Any specifics on types of fish?
Yeah. Highly migratory sharks are mentioned as being trouble. Over half the assessed stocks are unsustainable. Overall, 43.5% of the 23 assessed shark stocks were overfished.
Sharks are really feeling the pressure. Is anything being done internationally?
Well, the sources mentioned the WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies. That's relatively recent.
What does that agreement do?
It has 3 key prohibitions. It bans subsidies for vessels or operators caught doing IUU fishing.
Okay, hits them financially.
Right. It also prohibits subsidies for fishing stocks that are already overfished unless there are clear measures in place to rebuild that stock.
Makes sense.
And third, it forbids subsidies for fishing on the high seas outside the jurisdiction of coastal states or regional fisheries management organizations. Basically, unregulated areas.
Yeah, so using trade rules to tackle harmful fishing practices.
Exactly. If you look at the big picture, it really shows how complex managing these shared global resources is and how trade and environment issues are getting increasingly linked.
Okay. Shifting focus, again, governance and ethics in India. The Lokpal.
Yes, the Lokpal of India. They've adopted a new motto.
What is it?
Empower citizens, expose corruption.
Sounds proactive. Remind us, what is the Lokpal?
It's the anti-corruption ombudsman body, established under the Lokpal and Lokayuktas Act of 2013. Its job is to investigate corruption allegations against public functionaries.
And who does that cover? Just senior officials?
It's quite broad. Public servants inside or outside India. And notably, the sources point out it includes the Prime Minister within its purview.
Right, that was a major point when the law was passed. What about its structure?
It has a chairperson and up to 8 members. There are strict rules. They can't be MPs or state legislators, must be over 45, no criminal convictions.
And the chairperson?
Needs to be a former Chief Justice of India or a Supreme Court judge, or alternatively, an eminent person meeting specific criteria.
How long do they serve?
The term is 5 years, or until they reach the age of 70, whichever comes first.
So for you listening, the Lokpal is this specific institution designed to boost accountability at the top. This new motto perhaps signals a renewed focus on public engagement in that process.
Seems like it.
Okay, let's talk international travel for a moment. There was some news about Schengen visas.
Yes, apparently a scam where someone was fraudulently promising Schengen visas.
Right. So let's quickly touch on the Schengen area itself. What is it?
It's a zone made up of 29 European countries. That includes 25 EU members, plus 4 non-EU countries, Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein.
And the main idea behind it?
Closer cooperation for mutual benefit. The most visible part is the removal of border checks between these countries.
No passport checks when you travel from, say, France to Germany within the zone.
Exactly. Free movement.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
What's the impact of removing those internal borders beyond just making holidays easier?
Well, the sources suggest it's actually a big driver of economic competitiveness for businesses in the EU.
How so?
By facilitating that free movement of people and goods across a huge area without border delays or bureaucracy, it significantly boosts the single market, makes trade and business operations much smoother.
So it's a core part of the economic integration project.
Definitely. Much more than just tourism.
Okay. Digital economy now. UPI payments and MDR.
Right. There was a clarification from the Ministry of Finance on this.
What did they say?
They confirmed there are currently no plans to impose a merchant discount rate, or MDR, on UPI payments.
Okay. And MDR is?
It's basically the fee that banks charge merchants for processing digital payments instantly. You know, when you tap your card or use UPI.
Merchants used to pay this on card payments, right?
Yeah, typically around 1% or so. But the government waived MDR charges specifically for UPI back in 2020.
Why did they do that?
To promote digital payments, make it cheaper for merchants to accept UPI, and encourage wider adoption.
So for you using UPI daily, this policy means the merchant isn't being charged that specific fee for your transaction, which helps keep UPI acceptance high and often free for consumers too.
Exactly. It's a policy choice to subsidize that part of the digital payment ecosystem.
Got it. Let's talk defense cooperation. Exercise Conquest.
Yes, the Indian Army contingent arrived in Mongolia for this multinational exercise. It's the 22nd edition, running mid to late June.
Conquest. It started smaller, didn't it?
Yeah. Began as a bilateral thing between the U.S. and Mongolia back in 2003.
And became multilateral later.
In 2006, now involves quite a few countries.
And what's India's main goal in participating?
The sources specifically mention is to prepare the Indian Armed Forces for UN peacekeeping operations under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter.
Chapter 7, that's the part dealing with more robust peacekeeping.
Right. Action regarding threats to the peace, breaches of the peace, and acts of aggression. It allows the Security Council to authorize measures, potentially including force, to maintain international peace and security.
So these exercises are practical training for those kinds of demanding UN missions.
Precisely. It's about building interoperability and understanding procedures for complex peacekeeping scenarios under specific UN mandates.
Interesting. Okay, sticking with international standards, but on the maritime side again. ILA.
Right. India participated in the ILA Council session in Nice recently as vice president.
And ILA is?
The International Association of Marine Aids to Navigation and Lighthouse Authorities. Basically, the global body for standards related to things like buoys, lighthouses, vessel traffic services.
Keeping ships safe. It was set up when?
Back in 1957.
And there was a recent change in its status.
Yes, quite significant. In 2024, it changed from being a non-governmental organization, NGO, to an intergovernmental organization, IGO.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is coordinating things like buoys and lighthouses globally so important? And what does becoming an IGO mean?
Well, shipping is inherently global, right? Having standardized aids to navigation ensures ships from anywhere can understand signals and navigate safely everywhere. Consistency is key.
Makes sense.
ILA brings together national authorities responsible for this, plus manufacturers, consultants, research institutes to share best practices and develop technical standards.
And the change to IGO?
It means it's now formally constituted by member states, rather than just being an association of authorities. This likely gives its standards and recommendations more formal weight in international maritime law and regulation. Governments are now directly involved in its governance.
More official clout, basically.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. Now let's swing back to climate policy and trade. CBAM.
Yes, the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. The sources note India has voiced deep reservations about it.
CBAM. Remind us what that is.
It's the EU's plan to put a price on the carbon emissions associated with producing certain carbon-intensive goods imported into the EU. Things like steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, electricity, hydrogen.
So if India exports steel to the EU, there might be a carbon cost attached.
Essentially, yes. The importer in the EU would have to buy CBAM certificates corresponding to the carbon price that would have been paid if the goods were produced under the EU's own carbon pricing rules.
What's the EU's stated goal with this?
Two main things. To prevent carbon leakage, where EU companies might move production to countries with weaker climate policies, and to encourage cleaner industrial production in non-EU countries.
It's part of their bigger climate plan.
Right, the Fit for 55 package, aiming to cut EU greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels.
When does the CBAM thing actually kick in?
Full enforcement is set to start in 2026. There's a transitional phase currently running from 2023 to 2025, mainly focused on reporting emissions data.
So India's reservations. What's the underlying tension here?
Well, it really brings up that tricky intersection of climate action and international trade. Is CBAM a legitimate environmental measure to level the playing field? Or is it potentially a protectionist trade barrier disguised as climate policy, unfairly penalizing developing economies like India? That's the core debate.
Yeah, a complex one with big implications. Okay, staying with the environment but domestically. The Bajarathi eco-sensitive zone.
Yes, there's a concern raised by activists about a solid waste incinerator installed at Gangotri, which falls inside this zone.
Okay, first, what are eco-sensitive zones, or ESZs?
They are areas notified under the Environment Protection Act, 1986. They typically surround national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, or cover ecologically fragile areas like river sources. The idea is to create a buffer zone where activities are regulated to protect the core sensitive area.
And the Bhagirathi ESC specifically?
It was created to protect the upper stretch of the river Ganga from its origin at Gaumukh down to Uttarkashi. It covers a pretty large area, over 4,000 square kilometers. It's about preserving that pristine, ecologically vital headwater region.
And the rules for this zone?
The notification from 2012 mandates the Uttarakhand state government prepare a zonal master plan, CMP, outlining permissible activities, which must then be implemented under the supervision of a monitoring committee.
So the issue with the incinerator is whether it complies with the ZMP and the goals of the ESC.
Presumably, yes. It highlights that constant challenge, balancing development needs, even essential ones like waste management, with the strict environmental protections required in these highly sensitive zones, especially one critical to the Ganga River system.
A difficult balance indeed. Okay, a quick biodiversity note next. Eurasian otters.
Yeah, just a mention of a rare sighting reported in South Kashmir.
Eurasian otter, they live near water, right?
Semi-aquatic mammal, yes. Found across Eurasia, Europe, Asia, and even parts of North Africa. In India, they're in the Himalayas, the Northeast, and parts of the South.
What do they look like?
Sleek brown fur, long body, thick tail, short legs, built for moving in water.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What are their adaptations for water?
They've got quite a few. Webbed feet, obviously, for swimming. They can also close off their ears and nose when they dive underwater.
Handy.
And their foo is amazing. It's incredibly dense with short underfur that traps a layer of air right next to their skin. That provides fantastic insulation against the cold water.
Wow, like a natural wetsuit. What's their conservation status?
They're listed as near threatened by the IUCN, and they're on Appendix I of CEECS, which means trade is highly restricted due to extinction risk. So, yeah, a rare sighting is definitely noteworthy for local biodiversity tracking.
Cool. Okay, technology now. AI. Reasoning-based language models.
Right, RLM. There's news of a French AI startup, Mistral, launching what they claim is Europe's first RLM.
Okay, so we know about LLMs, large language models, right? Trained on huge data to understand and generate text. How are RLMs different?
The idea is that RLMs go a step further by incorporating more explicit reasoning mechanisms. They're not just pattern matching from the data.
How do they reason?
The technique mentioned is chain of thought. It means the model tries to break down a complex problem into smaller steps and works through them logically, kind of like showing it's working. The aim is to get more accurate, reliable, and contextually aware answers.
So less likely to just make something up that sounds plausible.
That's the hope. It's presented as a contrast to traditional LLMs that rely heavily on just the sheer scale of data and computing power. Though concerns about the costs, proprietary nature, and complexity of these new models are also mentioned.
Still, it sounds like an interesting shift, moving beyond just predicting the next word towards something more like structured thinking in AI.
Exactly. It's definitely a fascinating area of AI development to watch.
And finally today, let's end with a little bit of wonder. Astronomy. A major lunar standstill.
Yes, this rare phenomenon was apparently observed recently. It happened to coincide with the strawberry moon.
Strawberry moon. That's just the name for June's full moon, right?
Correct. Named after the strawberry harvesting season in North America, traditionally. Nothing astronomical about the name itself.
But the major lunar standstill is astronomical. What is it?
It happens when the moon's orbit reaches its maximum tilt or inclination relative to the Earth's equator.
Maximum tilt. What does that look like from down here?
It means the moon rises and sets at its most northerly and southerly points along the horizon over the course of the month. And at its highest point in the sky during the night, for the northern hemisphere, it appears noticeably lower than usual.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source says it's rare. How rare?
Very rare. This alignment, this maximum tilt, only occurs about once every 18.6 years.
18.6 years. That really is a long cycle, a genuinely rare sight for skywatchers.
It is. A good reminder of those long, slow, predictable celestial cycles happening above us.
Wow. Well, that's quite a journey we've taken today, from LPG connections and edible oil policy,
Through Social Security surges, maritime risks, anti-ragging rules, global fisheries.
Lokpal, Schengen, UPI fees, military exercises, navigation standards, carbon taxes.
Eco-sensitive zones, otter adaptations, AI reasoning, and finally, the moon's long dance. A real mix.
Absolutely.
And, this raises an important question, I think. How do we connect the dots across all these seemingly disparate areas? A scheme here, a report there, an environmental issue, a trade rule, a tech advance.
Yeah, how do they fit together?
Well, each piece gives us a clue about the larger systems we're part of: national policies, global trade networks, ecosystems, technological shifts. Understanding the details within these sources, like we've tried to do today, is really key to grasping those bigger, complex pictures.
That's a great way to put it. We really host this deep dive into the information from June 13th, Part 1, has given you some valuable insights, maybe clarified some things, or even just reminded you of topics worth revisiting. Thanks for bringing us this stack of sources to work through.
My pleasure.
And if you, our listener, found this useful for staying informed and making those connections, please do take a second to like and subscribe to the show.
Your support really does help us keep these deep dives going.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to the next deep dive with you.